Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is just a quick recording where I would like to share some thoughts and epiphanies with you because we have very soon, as in tomorrow, actually, let me just move the chart to that day. No, not tomorrow. So, actually, the 9th of August, which coincides with the full moon taking place in the sign of Aquarius. So, wow, that's quite a. I just surprised myself while doing this. Wow, this is a pretty big energy because we have a grand Air Trine, but something makes this grand Air Trine very different than what we usually are used to. So let me mark this on the map so everyone can see this. So first of all, we are speaking about Uranus at 1 degree of Gemini conjunct Sedna. So that's very strong energy, especially that Uranus feels right at home. Uranus loves being in the sign of Gemini, especially when it gets to the third decan, so from 20 to 30 degrees. But Uranus is able to bring out its truest self, its most authentic self in the sign of Gemini. And this word, authentic, is no coincidence because that's what Sedna wants as well. Sedna is the higher octave of Ceres, so she represents the primal, that which is in the depths. Of course, a transformation, an adaptation, but this is where it is the harsh external that distills to the very core, to the very essence, to the primal, and it is the primal that adapts. So a very powerful symbol of rebirth, but not any type, not the typical phoenix rebirth, because after the rebirth, everything is different. A metamorphosis, if you will. So Uranus is charged with that energy, and it's in Gemini. So it's actually in the gateway of our lowest perceptions, our lower mind, reaching up to the higher mind, of course. But the gateway is even the glyph of Gemini. It looks like a gate, it looks like a segment of the Stonehenge, the standing stones. So it's an entrance and exit. And the mind, of course, is a gateway to what we allow inside of our being for it to be processed. And Uranus is, as I said, the depth of authenticity with Sedna. Long story short, something activates deep within us. So around that time, it's almost like a self initiated, auto, in a sense, automatic purge of the mind where it releases and it returns to its own authenticity, its own unique natural frequency, if you will. That's such a gift, a short lasting gift, but we have no idea how important that moment can be. Now let us see the other element of the Grand Trine, Pluto in the sign of Aquarius retrograde. I'm not gonna speak about this really because I spoke and every other like Pluto was and still is the star of the next basically 15 years. So yeah, I don't need to mention all that much about Pluto and Aquarius. Aquarius, the higher mind, the dream, the spirit. But when I say spirit, the spirit that enters our reality through the higher mind, highest principles, philosophies, technology, AI. interhuman connection, telepathy, all of that, Aquarius. But this is where we also have a Mars at 1 degree and few minutes of Libra. And on its own, well, of course, it is special and very welcome because it completes the Grand Trine, right? So, the Grand Air Trine. But on its own, Mars doesn't like it all that much in the sign of Libra because very many times it needs to take action on the behalf of others, or, well, Libra forced by circumstances, by one's own decisions and choices, by the law, by a court ruling, by what is right and moral. Anyway, so, sir, I wanted to say certain times, but many times it goes against the primal instincts of Aries, for example. That primal, raw, self-serving energy. So that's why Mars has a pretty tough time in Libra, because, and also the other side of this energy, to do certain things, because Mars is the action principle, for the self is so natural because we know it. You know what I mean? It's within us. There's a certain way how, for example, we feed ourselves. When we have to feed another, let's say our crush who just came to a dinner date, you can imagine that Mars is gonna have a totally different expression than feeding the self. Where I don't know about other people, but when the hunger is really strong, I don't even plate it out or anything. So, but if the crush would come, well, you can imagine it's better than the five-star, the best restaurant in the world. So it's a Mars that really. So you see, this is the Libra type of Mars. Now, on its own, this Grand Trine, well, it's so empowering. We know something, or we muster the will or whatever we need to muster to figure it out, learn it, get to the bottom of things. Unfortunately, with Pluto in the picture, like it or not, we still need to get to the bottom of things. Even though it's an inspirational energy, Pluto is the surgeon, right? The knife that cuts, the needle that penetrates. So, Pluto, which is anyway in any way, shape, and form fantastic, but Mars is not alone. Mars activates the Virgo supercluster at 5 degrees of Libra, and that's one of the most powerful energies in existence. And just give me a few seconds because this is hard to explain. That is closely linked to us. I'm not saying it's the most powerful energy in the cosmos, but one of the most powerful, in a big sense, influential energies. But of course, we cannot take this individually, but heavily collectively, in any way, shape, and but especially cosmologically. So it's not even about real life. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's the Virgo supercluster. Imagine it as an infinitely more potent galactic center. So it's the source of our local cosmos. It keeps the neighboring, our galaxy, and the whole galactic cluster that we are in balance and on its course, on its path, and communicates with the rest of the larger cosmos. So that's the Virgo supercluster. You can imagine that immediately it's upgrade energy. And it's purifying energy because the Virgo supercluster contains the divine architecture of everything in existence in our local galaxy. So it's the original plan. That's why Virgo, the purity, the purifying factor. Because when the original design gets way too distorted, mutated, perverted, no problem, that's the backup. It's almost like when the cloud that you upload your data to as a, you know what I mean? Or the backup of your computer. So the Virgo supercluster contains that information. That means including our genetics, our original genetics, and everything original. That which nature herself uses to create her. Well, I don't want to say experiment as such, but her art. To experiment with her art. That's the book she reads. That's you know what I mean? That's the manual to everything. So it's very important that this Grand Trine contains it in a very exact way. Okay, Pluto may not be exact to the degree, but it's a strong mental energy where, and this is rare, but because usually the mind is what we make of it, really. It's really what we put into it, what we allow it, we're really the judges of what happens in the mental sphere, even if we don't like to admit that it's really the case, and all responsibility is really ours. Maybe only now do we live in those time, maybe this year, when not even we can take responsibility of the filth and deception and ultimately false information that is being forcefully injected into it. But other than now, I think it's really up to us what we allow into our mind and what not. So usually, you know what I mean? When it's the mind, it's never all that uh, outside of our will. But this energy is where we get a free boost, either a powerful big epiphany or a big purge of the mental sphere, where that which is not true and natural to us simply won't resonate. And that's how we'll discard it, because Pluto is the discard principle. And we have the South Node in Virgo. Well, Virgo may not be mind energy, but it is how we apply the mind energy, the application of the mind energy. So this is when Virgo needs to purge, the purge will reach the mind. So ultimately, indirectly, it will get to the faulty or incorrect or no longer resonant idea, thought, etc. So that helps a lot. Mercury retrograde helps a lot, because I don't need to explain why. Full moon in the same place as Pluto helps a lot, even though that just stirs the spirits and it adds a shock factor to it. But this is where we get a blessing of knowing simply, I don't even know how to, it's almost like a lightning bolt hits us, and we will be able to know which one of our thoughts are actually serving our highest, greatest good, and which ones are pollutions that we cannot align ourselves with. But since it's air energy, this is also relationship energy. We'll just know who doesn't resonate. And how will we know? it will feel unfamiliar. We will simply feel the differences of higher thinking between us and whatever, and that difference of higher thinking will not be tolerated anymore, because usually it's the other way around, where we might not tolerate as much differences in the lowest perceptions, the small conflicts, the petty, the, you know what I mean, how a small insult or a bad word reaches cataclysmic levels. So usually it's that. So the differences in higher thinking are not actively perceived, so they don't bother us. Now, however, we will just understand without having to, dig deep within our thoughts, that why and who and what in principle and philosophy, way of thinking, higher thinking basically, does not resonate with us and has nothing in common with us. And when we don't have anything in common on a high level with people, anything, company, idea, politics, etc., then that means the silent, passive end of the relationship. So there's this energy at play where this Grand Trine will change a lot of choices, but quickly, radically. And the essence here, we get the empowerment of the Virgo supercluster, mind over matter like never before. Because when thought is pure, but pure has a big condition on it. Pure doesn't mean aligned, just to understand in a nutshell what I'm trying to say here. The biggest Buddhist principles, that which would represent pure thought, but also authentically to the person's own divine imprint, signature, architecture, call it whatever you want. These two conditions must be met at the same time. Then mind over matter, almost literally. So this is like a big boost. Expect ideas, epiphanies, realizations, eureka moments, big revelations, shocks, secrets coming out, etc., and a massive turmoil in the world of politics and anything that has to do with what we're seeing on the world stage, especially these days. So something big kind of comes out. But that's one element of reality, right? One which we may not necessarily be able to directly control. This is why taking ownership of our own reality and our own little bubble, our own inner cosmos, at this moment is the greatest blessing. It empowers us, and we will see everyone in our lives acting a bit differently. Acting, but especially in communication, in what they generate, what their identities, their signature, their frequency, we will see their authenticity. How people are in their most realist expression, if that makes sense. So this is gonna be a very interesting day and full moon, but of course it's not just one day. It's a whole week, or this energy extends a little bit because Mars doesn't move that very quickly, and the energy of course reverberates as well. So yeah, Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you found this as interesting as I did.